Good evening. Many people dualize life into two compartments, and they call one the reality, and they refer to the practical aspects of life. The idea of making a living, the idea of operating in the 6 days of the 7 days of the week, and that's what they feel is the essence. And sometimes they add on the notion of, well, we really need to nurture meaningfulness. We need to nurture fulfillment and happiness. But of course, for the majority of people, it's like, surely that's something that simply happens if you do the reality well. And the truth of the matter is that one has to nurture the fulfillment, the happiness, the higher order, what Maslow calls self-actualization, as much as one has to work in terms of securing ourselves and creating physical integrity. In Judaism, we don't dichotomize. The two are really part of one. And it's how we express that oneness in all aspects. And in the contemporary world, this is called holistic. And the idea of holistic, whether you spell it W-H-O-L-E or H-O-L-Y, whichever way you prefer, means the same thing. It means it's all one. They're flip sides of the same coin. Whether we are talking about spirituality with a small s, or whether we're talking about physical well-being, or whether we're talking about financial strategy, we're talking about the same thing. How do I, as an individual, express holistically in this world in my lifetime? And as I'm fond of saying, you've heard me say it many times, but I believe in it implicitly, every single individual in this room is a unique, reincarnated soul brought into the here and now because you individually have something to offer that no one else in the world can. There's no second version of you. There never was and never will be. This is the moment that you shine, these 120 years of your life. And if you don't do so assertively, with self-esteem and with confidence, we miss out. To do that, we need to optimize who we are. Optimization means our physical self and our spiritual self operating as an integrated unit. And that's why we have this series, which we call Manifest. And this one's called Infinite Possibilities. Because each one of us has the capacity... I always tell people, by the way, please leave your cell phone on. And the reason is obvious. Did you not spend so much time choosing your jingle? And therefore when it goes off, it reveals so much about you. And then all those people around you who get very angry at you that you didn't turn it off, it tells us all about them. And that way we get to know about everybody in the room. So turn your cell phones on. That way we'll get to know about you. So the idea of an integrated whole, a manifest, infinite possibilities, because each one of us is infinite in the possibility of how we confer ourselves on the world as such. You have to have self-esteem, confidence, and you have to have empathy and compassion for the next person. And then you can offer yourself to the next person. So we have 5 offerings tonight from people who feel very secure in themselves that they do have something to offer. And through their example, we all will gain from it. I'm going to introduce them one by one as we ask them to rise to speak to us in the front. They know full well they have a 15-minute limit because we are told that that's your tolerance level, and we will conform to that. I'm going to ring a little bell a few minutes in advance, as I often enjoy doing, in my perverse pleasure of making them nervous. But nevertheless, we're going to have a wonderful evening. Our first presenter is Ros Ben-Moshe. Now, Ros is not a stranger to us. Ros is actually a very good friend, both personally and of Spiritgrow. She's presented many times here, and she is a wonderful individual person who specializes in laughter mode of developing wellness, positivity, resilience, and mindfulness. All her programs, training, keynotes, and coaching sessions are evidence-based and tailored to meet individual and organizational needs. They provide techniques and strategies to enhance well-being, positivity, and life fulfillment. She is a wellness and positivity coach. She's also a successful author. She's also a survivor of severe illness. She's been challenged in life and come through. And I really would like you to welcome, and it's my privilege for us to have here, Ros Ben-Moshe.
Thanks so much, Laibl. Put my specs on, I can see you. Well, it's wonderful to be here, and I'm going to, over the next 3 weeks, be introducing you to a concept called positivity resilience. So resilience, I think, something, it's a term that's, everybody's sort of heard about, but I want to talk about how you can bounce forward. A lot of people talk about bouncing back after adversity. So we're going to be looking at ways to bounce forward. So in tonight's lecture or talk, we're going to be talking, it's like giving a definition, what it's not and how it differs from regular resilience, how it relates to emotional and physical health, interventions to help boost positivity and help manage stress and anxiety, and focus on gratitude. And I realised I forgot to, I forgot you did tell me it wasn't going to be automatic, so we're going to pop some. This is what it's all about. Is it going to play? So it's about getting knocked down. I mean, life is all about being knocked down, but it's how well you spring back up. And I just want to tell you, a lot of people sort of think, positivity, it's a bit wishy-washy, not so sure. Who wants to be happy all the time? Well, guess what? That's not what it is all about. I mean, I am a fan of the smiley face, but let me tell you, that's not what we're talking about. It's actually really important as human beings to experience a whole spectrum of emotions. So it's negative and positive. What it really is all about is how we can actually create positivity. So talking about being positive, you often hear people who, say, well, I try to stay positive. Well, that's fantastic that you try and stay positive, but that's a very passive thing to do. What we really want to be able to do is actually transform that into an active state, and you have to be able to be given strategies and techniques to be able to do that. So perhaps before we even begin, just take a sort of consider what are some of the qualities of positivity. It's not necessarily what you would immediately think about, as I say, like the smiley, happy face and, everything's great. It's actually qualities that when you actually look at them, you might actually think, gee, that's a bit similar to mindfulness, because there's quite a strong synergy here between qualities of positivity and mindfulness. These are being open, okay? Being open to things that happen and just sort of seeing how, being curious, a bit of distance to them, why might this be happening, being appreciative, being real. So there's no point pressuring yourself to be positive if that is the last thing in the world that you feel like doing, because then it's just going to add lots of internal pressure, and it also flows out into your social world. So you need to actually be real in these feelings. And because we're talking about positivity, we're actually talking about ways in which we seek the good. There's one thing that you're probably going to hear me talk about in the next 3 sessions, is that what you place your attention on, what you focus on, that is what grows. So if you practice fear, if you practice worry, guess what? You get really good at it. But if you start to actually practice things like some of the things we're going to be talking about, like self-compassion, gratitude, and other things, like, using your signature strengths, we actually get really good at that. So they are some of the qualities of positivity. Now, no matter what happens in your life, we cannot control what happens to us. Some people are familiar with my story. I did not choose to get bowel cancer, but it happened. And so we cannot control our external circumstances. But what we have a lot of power to be able to do is actually control our internal environment, our internal circumstance. So I love this quote. Every situation can be bitter or better. The difference is I. And that's Rabbi Y. Rubenstein. Great initials. So we actually hold a lot of control. The problem is that when we face challenges or when we face adversity, that sort of sense of empowerment, that sense of control can actually be one of the first things that goes out the door. So what we're going to be talking about is strategies that we can actually lean on to really create this sort of buffer of positivity. So when things do get tough, when things do get challenging, we can draw on these things. Now, I thought it might be an interesting exercise. We are a bit limited in time. You can do this online, but we're going to do it right now because you probably may have sort of in the past sort of wondered, or I don't know, if you sort of think of yourself as a positive person. This is just a bit of a snapshot today. This isn't going to tell your life history of how positive you are, but it will give you a good indication of today, your positivity ratio. So on your chair, there should be a piece of paper and it says positivity self-test. I'm going to give you a whole 2 minutes to calculate. So essentially, it's how you have felt in the past day. You look back and you use a scale of 0 to 4, as it says. So 0 being not at all to 4 being extremely. Just quickly go through that list. As I say, it's just a snapshot. And then we're going to calculate, you're going to calculate your positivity ratio today, okay? So just in the next moment or two, whiz through this. And if you find it difficult to do, you can theoretically hop on your phone and do it online, but it's probably, let's just stick with the paper. Try not to think about it too much. I mean, you can, but I'm just going to be pushing you along, so. Your snapshot of positivity for today. Well, we don't want to add them up quite yet. We'll just give you another 30 seconds. If you don't have time to complete it, it's fine. I'm actually going to be encouraging you to do this during the week as well. Have people, show of hands, who's completed? Okay, fabulous. So now what I want you to do is, I want you to put a circle around 1. Okay, circle 1, circle 4, Circle 8, bless you. Number 8. Circle 11. So we've got 1, 4, 8, 11. Oh, it's like legs 11. We're not doing bingo, it's okay. 12, 13. I always wanted to be a bingo host. No, I didn't. 14, 15, 16, 19. So you should have circled 1, 4, 8, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 19. Okay, you're going to add those circled numbers up, please. Okay, that's your positivity. That's your positivity total. Hopefully I'm not taxing your mathematical brain too much. And then when you've done that, you are going to be adding up the remaining things that you haven't circled. So that would be 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 17, 18, and 20. So the ones that you haven't circled, you're now going to add up. Is anyone totally lost? Good. You know, a computer can do this, but I just thought, let's give it a go. Okay. So the circled things are your positivity things, and the other ones were the negativity. So now what you're going to do is you are going to divide your P, your circle things, divided by the negativity, and that will give you your positivity to negativity ratio for today. Okay, so say for example you got 24 positive and you got 8 negative, then your ratio would be 3 to 1. Okay, so now for those of you who found that more of a mathematical task and you got really stressed by it, I'm really sorry. You can actually do this at home and it takes all of the stress out. But what I want to actually that was okay. So basically what I want to just bring your awareness to is the fact that generally speaking, the higher your positive ratio, the more positive emotion you're experiencing on a daily basis, which is a very positive thing. Because positivity actually has a really strong health benefit in terms of increased lifespan, lower rates of depression, lower levels of distress, greater resistance to the common cold, better psychological well-being, better cardiovascular health, okay? So that's really important. And the other thing is that there are other resources associated with positivity, and that's where we're talking about resilience, social connection. In most cases, when you're actually thinking about people who tend to have high positivity ratios, they tend to actually have more connections, more meaningful connections with people. So that's where social connection really plays a role. And as I was saying before, in terms of mindfulness, it actually allows for more expansive thinking, because you're sort of thinking, right, well, in this particular moment, is there anything positive? Is there anything good in this particular moment? Is there anything I can be grateful for? And they really are attributes to help you get through a challenging time. We've all heard about stress and cortisol. So the thing about positivity is that it actually feeds into our happy hormones. So the dopamine, getting our dose, the dopamine, the oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. And that's what really has a positive effect on our well-being. We talk a lot about diets. I'm actually encouraging you to consider a diet of positive emotions, because that's going to feed your positivity resilience. Because it's not just about what you're feeling today. It's not just about what that positivity ratio just told you in this given moment. It's actually what happens over the next few weeks, how many positive interactions, how many positive emotions you experience over the weeks and over the months that lead to physiological change, which is the end of my presentation. And I just wanted to just end with this, if you just indulge me, because I've got the thing.
Always look on the bright side of life.
This week, your homework is going to actually be,
Always look on the light side of life.
Write the life of Brian. you're actually going to find three
If life
things
seems jolly
that
rotten,
actually
there's something you
you're
forgot.
grateful for. Things that
that's
went
to
well, and
laugh
I
and
believe
start
you've
and
got your
dance and sing.
instructions in your
When you're
manual.
feeling in the
So
dumps,
thank you very
don't be
much.
silly chumps. Just
Thank you so much, Ros. A wonderful introduction. One of the areas where we're finding great difficulty in the last 60, 70 years is handling food. And that's really a strange phenomenon because it's something that surely comes natural to all living beings, whether they be vegetation, animal, or human. And one would have thought that we're built with an inbuilt wisdom in context of that. I suspect that for some thousands of years, that inbuilt wisdom operated. However, I think that in most recent times, the way that media is processing us, the way that commercial interests are invading our minds and our hearts, we're losing the art of being sensible in context of food. And as a consequence of that, we're finding that the ingestion of food, quality of food, toxicity in food is actually changing us and not for the better. So it's rather important that we become re-educated in context of this. Dr. Leon Massage, whom I know personally well as a very wonderful advisor in many respects, celebrated as the go-to weight loss physician by many doctors throughout Australia, and he's been training overweight and obesity conditions for more than 25 years. He's helped thousands of patients to lose weight and regain their health and energy by teaching them how to overcome their genetic predisposition to gaining weight, as well as his unique techniques to overcome emotional eating. He's a doctor, an author, sought-after speaker, and he's recently published a book entitled I Can't Believe It's a Diet, and it's used by many doctors to help their patients lose weight. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Leon Massage.
Thank you. Are we on? Yeah. Okay, I'm not going to waffle. Thank you very much for coming, and I know that my time starts now, so I'm going to get right into it and not muck around. This is breakthrough stuff. This is new technology, new information. I find it fascinating. I've been researching this for about 9 months now, and you'll find that it has the potential in the near future to change our lives. So what in the world is the gut microbiome? At the moment, we all have approximately 100 trillion bacteria in our gut. And when I say bacteria, I actually mean bacteria, viruses, fungi, and protozoa. All of these together, and they weigh about 1.5 kilos, make up what we call the gut microbiome. Now, for many years, we used to think that what happens in the bowel stays in the bowel, just stays there until it's time to go to the toilet, and then everything comes out. But it's pretty much, we thought it was like Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but it's not true. We've actually found that the gut microbiome and the bacteria have a significant influence on everything, or if not everything, many things. Has a big influence on our immune function, our metabolism, our weight, brain function, and inflammation. As a matter of fact, we already know at least 25 conditions that are not only caused by, but definitely impacted by the gut microbiome. And they include inflammatory bowel conditions like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, chronic fatigue, obesity, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and quite a few others. In fact, there's absolutely no doubt that our overall health is impacted by our gut health. And if you have a healthy microbiome, you are more likely to have a healthy body. If you have a an unhealthy microbiome, you are guaranteed to have a sick body. Now, the gut microbiome varies. It's not like static all of the time. Obviously, it changes. And one of the reasons, of course, is with that ridiculous number of organisms in the bowel, they're always competing for food. And as a result, many things can change the relative populations of the various bacteria and viruses in the gut. And what changes them? Diet, lifestyle, and exposure to certain chemicals, and I'll come to that in a minute. In fact, the gut bacteria are always competing for food. And if you feed them the right food, you will grow the right bacteria. If you feed them the wrong food, you will grow the bad bacteria. And as a result, this will alter the balance, and subsequently it will impact on your health. So, what are the foods that alter our... Am I at the right place? Yeah. What are the foods that will alter the gut microbiome in a positive way? Strangely enough, all the foods that you already know are pretty good for you. And they are things like vegetables, nuts, seeds, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, berries, onions, and beans. You don't have to worry if you have any sensitivities to any of these. You don't have to have each and every one of them. What are the things that alter the gut microbiome in a negative way? Again, not much of a surprise. Processed foods, refined carbohydrates, antibiotics, pesticides, stress, absolutely no question about that. NSAIDs. NSAIDs are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like naproxen and many others, and PPIs. PPIs are protein pump inhibitors. They're things like Zantac and Nexium and other things that we take for reflux and for ulcers and so on. So, again, no surprise. Processed foods damage the good bacteria. And this leads to metabolic dysfunction, it leads to insulin resistance, and it leads to obesity. In fact, if we want to change the gut microbiome, we can, but we can do it in several ways. You can either feed the gut or these bugs the right food, and they are the second one there. They're the prebiotics. Prebiotics are foods, usually non-digestible foods, that's what they like, that feed the good bacteria and stimulate their growth. If you want to bypass this or help it along, you use probiotics. Probiotics are colonies of microorganisms that are in there that are going to be rushing into your bowel and growing there and taking the place of and competing with some of the bugs you want to get rid of. And the third way, of course, is something we call symbiotics. Symbiotics are just a mixture of prebiotics and probiotics. And what are classic symbiotics? Much of the fermented food. Things like sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir yogurt, becoming very popular these days, and for very good reason, because they do have a positive impact on your bowel and a positive impact on your health. I'm watching the time. All right, so what in the world has this got to do with weight? And this is quite fascinating. As a matter of fact, it's, as I said, this is all pretty new research, and it virtually started in 2009 when some researchers decided to do something we call fecal transplants. Who's heard of fecal transplants? Most of you. Interesting. What's a fecal transplant for those of you who haven't heard? Fecal transplant is when you take feces, the bowel contents, from one population and put it into another one. And what happened, the researchers bred colonies of lean mice that were genetically lean. And then they bred colonies of obese mice that were genetically obese. What they did was take the fecal material, the feces, or the SHIT, from the bowels of the lean mice and put it into the bowels of the obese mice. And guess what happened? They lost weight, despite the fact that they didn't change their diet. Well, of course, that tweaked a lot of interest, as you would imagine. Now, we then started looking at the various bacteria, different organisms that are present in the gut. And there are thousands of different colonies of different types of bacteria and viruses. But like in all things, certain families stand out a little bit more than others. Like the two big mafia families in the bowel are the Bacteroidetes and the Firmicutes. And these, when it relates to weight. And we found that body weight seems to be related to the balance between those two families. In fact, if you look at the lean population and check their gut, they will have more Firmicutes and less Bacteroidetes. And have you heard of those My DNA, where you send off bowel specimens and so on and they break it down? I've actually had at least 4 or more patients who I've sent them off, and they all suffered from weight excess or obesity, and they had 87% Firmicutes, 13% Bacteroidetes, almost uniquely. And lean people have more Bacteroidetes and less Firmicutes. And also, it seems that in the obese populations, there is also a greater variety of and diversity of different colonies. We don't know why, but that just happens to be the case. So, we then found diets rich in protein increase the good guys, the Bacteroidetes. Diets high in sugar and processed foods increase the Firmicutes, the bad guys. And interestingly, we've known for a long time that these foods cause weight gain and obesity and insulin resistance, but now we actually are starting to believe that this is due to the fact that they impact on the gut bacteria, and it's the gut bacteria that actually cause this particular problem. So more research, more bacteria looked at, and guess what? We found quite a few different phenomena depending on which probiotics you use for these bacteria. We found that one decreased fat absorption, another decreased fat storage, some decreased abdominal fat, others increased satiety. They caused the body to release satiety hormones. There's a difference between appetite and satiety. Appetite suppressants make you less hungry. Satiety is the satisfaction after a meal, because you'll find that there are many people, and the obese community as a rule, tend to eat even after they're full. Why? Because they're not satisfied. You're cheating. I've got 4.5 minutes. Okay. So, interestingly enough, I got rid of these very quickly. There was one that had 50% great weight loss in women, but not in men, so I'm hiding that. I'm only joking. And of course, there are some, like acidophilus, which seems to be very common, that actually increase your propensity to gain weight and obesity. So I've actually gotten, let's skip this. I organised to get some of these probiotics put together in a capsule, and it's now available. But because many of the ones you get in the pharmacies are often the blind leading the blind, and no one knows what in the world's going on. But just quickly, and I just wanted to say a few things. The gut microbiome virtually starts when the child is born. And you are immediately behind the 8 ball if you are not born vaginally. Why? Because what happens when you are born vaginally, or if the baby is born in a normal vaginal delivery, they become infested or inculcated with the bacteria in the mother's vaginal canal. And the ones who are born by Caesar are inculcated with bacteria from the operating theatre. And these children, we didn't know why, often have greater rates of infection, greater rates of allergy and things like that. So very interesting. And also breastfeeding and bottle feeding. One of the things that occurs when you're breastfed is you have contact with the mother's skin. And again, you get the bacteria from the mother's skin. Whereas if you are bottle fed, you get the bacteria, or hopefully no bacteria, from the bottles or the teats. Big difference, and it does make a difference to your health and your wellness long term. So just to finish off, just a few little tidbits which are probably important to know. The gut is responsible for 70% of your immunity. No question about that. And it's the first physical barrier to invading bacteria. You can imagine. You're always taking in food with ridiculous amounts of bacteria. If you look at the operational health and safety situation, you see how many people don't wash their hands when they're delivering food and making food for you. It's a surprise that it's an amazing thing that people aren't getting gastroenteritis every day by their hundreds. And they're not because of this. The gut bacteria compete for food with these nasty bacteria and knock them off. In fact, vitamins, especially vitamin K and vitamin B, are produced in the bowel by the gut bacteria. And inflammation has a big, other way around. Inflammation doesn't have an impact on gut bacteria, which it does, but the gut bacteria have a big impact on inflammation and decrease it. And also cardiovascular disease. Heart disease, interestingly enough, is also impacted by the gut bacteria, but this is more to do with the bugs in your mouth. And one of the things that we find is that the same bacteria that give you dental decay, gingivitis and things like that, and you can talk to your dentist about that, and that's why it's so important to have good gum health and good teeth health, because they're found in the atherosclerotic plaques in coronary arteries. What that means is atherosclerotic plaques are the cholesterol layers that build up on the inside of the heart blood vessels. And many lay people think that what happens with heart disease and heart attacks is that your coronary vessels just get filled up with more and more of this cholesterol atherosclerotic plaque. But it's not true. That's not what happens. It's actually the stability of that plaque that really matters, because the thing that causes heart attacks is a sudden rupture of that plaque, not a slow build-up. And that's why people can come out of a stress ECG, walk down the street and have a heart attack, because the plaque can be unstable. Many of the medications you take, like the statins to lower cholesterol, don't just lower cholesterol, they decrease cholesterol in the plaque as well and improve plaque stability, which is a good thing for preventing heart disease. And so these gut bacteria, if they're in there, decrease stability and increase fragility. And as a result, you are more prone to heart attacks. And just to finish off, there is one other thing about the gut and the brain, and that is that the gut is often considered to be our second brain. And there is a ridiculously powerful relationship between the gut and the brain, and they both impact on each other in a real way, not in a pretend way. So that's just, you're welcome.
Thank you. Fascinating, isn't it? The different dimensions that come to play in something as simple as sitting at a table and eating. I guess that's why we call it conscious eating. There's so much to take in. Our next guest and wonderful presenter is Mr. Barry Berger. Now, Barry is not just a leading lawyer in town in family law, Berger and Cordos, and is a senior partner, but someone who takes a particular individual interest in terms of relationship formation and relationship breakdown. Certainly in his field of family law, that's very, very important. And he himself introduced a good amount of attempts to mediate as a way of trying to ensure that one doesn't have to move into further legalities and unnecessary costs and acrimony in terms of relationship breakdown. So not only do we have here a very leading lawyer who we're very privileged to have, but someone who takes a particular interest in the nature of humanity as such. On the side, he also happens to be a very enthusiastic cyclist, and I'm sure that that is very much integrated in context of this clarity of thinking and helping ensure that relationships remain bonded. Barry, to join us.
Pardon me, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Laibl.
Arrow that way.
Forward. Thank you. Good evening. Relationships in 45 minutes over 3 weeks. How easy, how incisive, how impactful, as Laibl would say. I want you to get out of your normal world, and I want us to think about relationships in the broadest possible way. And in this way, I don't know where we're going to go. Because, for instance, if I were to ask you, what 3 relationships do you currently have that you regard as important, what would you say? Anybody?
Wife and children.
Okay. Oh, I've got a light right in my eye. Sorry, I'll come over here. Anyone else? Parents. Planet. Mm-hmm. Work. What about the gut? No one has a relationship with the gut. We all have great relationships. What about a song? What about your feet? What about your health? This is what I'm talking about. Talking about it in that context brings out what is it about relationships. And of course, in our everyday interactions, we talk about human being relationships. And they're the most prominent, the most important. And why shouldn't they be? But what I would like to do is to take us through the 3 sessions that we're going to have. And because my brain has been told over many, many decades to think in a particular way which is analytical, I've broken it up into 3 parts. The beginning, the middle, and the end. And I've looked at it in terms of pyramids, but they don't have to be pyramids. And I've inverted them because sometimes the beginning of a relationship can be relatively small part of the totality. And as you can see, the middle can be, and it looks as though it's the same, but it doesn't have to be. And the end can be a long end or a very short end. We will deal with each of these over these 3 sessions. Today we'll talk about the beginning of a relationship. Now, I can tell you many things about what I think need to be considered in that way, but so what? I'm not here to tell you, each unique individual, as Laibl would say, what it is about the relationship, a relationship, all relationships that each of us have, but I can guide us through and also have you assist yourself in what are the aspects of the beginning of a relationship. And there are some people here of a certain age, and I put myself in there well, so we have great memories of many relationships, some extremely tight and close, and some a bit more detached. But what is it about those relationships? What is it that brought them into existence? There was a song that said, the long and winding road. It's not just the long, could be the short, could be the winding or the straight or the higgledy-piggledy. This is where it gets really interesting. And I challenge anyone to tell me they don't have at least one of that sort of a relationship that's all over the place. And that's not a bad thing. It's just we live on a planet that is imbibed with complexity and arrangements and human beings interact. And as we know, we have relationships that are for the moment, that for a purpose, and for a longevity. And within that, we have different variations of them. So when we talk about relationships, and when I'm talking to you about relationships, it's just to start the thought process and also perhaps reflect on what are some, I've talked about 3, important relationships. How did they begin? Some of us can remember, some of us can't. But it doesn't matter. It gets us thinking about how we interact. And it also tells us a lot about ourselves, because a lot of the relationship is about ourselves. So types of relationships. Family. These are not exclusive, and there'll be quite a few. And we've all mentioned family, and they're the most obvious, the most common, and thankfully in my practice, the ones that we want to see. From what I call the set 'em up stage, also to the knock 'em down stage. But anyway, that's another story, and I'm not here to talk shop. Work relationships. Social relationships. And that is very, very broad, because it can also be not even knowing the human being on the other side, because we can do it digitally. School. Education, call it what you will. And it's not just in the early stages of one's life, because school can extend forward. Spiritual relationships. And very, very strong. And these are the ones that really sometimes don't have to be put into words or can't be put into words. Transactional relationships. I love the relationship I have with my butcher. I don't have a good relationship with the supermarket, but so what? It is a relationship, whoever it is there. Experiential. Sometimes we just do something, and that is a relationship. It is relating. And we are part of it. We are intricately involved in it. And it, whatever it is, or the person, is involved with us. And the intimate relationships. And I'm not just talking sexually intimate, but there are intimate which really get into the soul. And we all know about those, and we can all reflect on them, and I hope we do. And when I see smiles on people's faces, I know that's what they're doing. And of course, professional. Again, that's not a plug for my firm. So, I would like you all just to give a little bit of thought, quietly, to what you each believe are 3, I'll say important, but they don't necessarily need to be important traits that are involved in forming a relationship. In fact, I can write some down. Why don't you throw them at me and I'll write them down? What was another one? Trust. Aretha Franklin comes in. Is that R-E-S-P-E-C-T?
Honesty. Consideration.
I might ask for a show of hands once we've got all of these up to see if we can put them into some order of priority.
Authenticity and integrity.
Oh, 2 very good ones. Where do we find someone with all of these? Searching. Vulnerability. Whoa.
Affection.
Connection. Okay. Look, good one. I missed that one. Common cause. Goals. Okay. Now, can I just suggest that we're not just looking at the, I'll call it intimate, interpersonal relationships. I'm talking relationships. So just take take it a bit further. I mean, what's my what is a trait informing my relationship with my butcher, for instance, or someone with whom I have a financial interaction? You know, they're not necessarily there, but a lot of them are. I mean, this is pretty important. That's pretty important.
Caring.
Caring.
Truth. Kindness.
Kindness and truth.
Exchange.
Oh, what a great room we've got working here. Attraction. Oh, we're getting to the important one. I was going to bring a song that I was going to play for you all, and that is What's Love Got to Do With It? No one's mentioned it. Now, I'm not saying you have to, but isn't it interesting? We've gone into parts very, very intense.
Don't all those things translate into love?
Ah, Laibl, please, the existential question. It's a question for yourself to answer, and please do and consider it. But isn't it interesting that word love, and I'm sorry to stop you there, but there is in the Americanization of the world, that's what is really at the crux of it all, we're told. And that just overshadows the reality of life, my view. Sorry. Well, one at a time. Understanding.
And spirituality.
Spirituality. We're running out of ink. Let's leave it there for a moment. Let's leave it there. So, there, thank you room, we have a lot. One more.
These attributes of what it means to be human or indeed ecstatic rather than those that are required for a relationship, especially the list of relationships that you enumerated earlier?
Well, what I was talking about more was from each person, what are traits that are important for yourself in the formation of a relationship. Now, everybody will have it in a different way, and maybe none of these, and maybe a lot more. And you are definitely right from your perspective. I don't know if we can generalise, and I don't know if it's valuable to generalise. All we can do is take what's in the room. Because as I said, I can't say what is or isn't important or should be given priority or whatever, because it's not about me, it's about everybody else. And one person can't easily impose on someone else. Now, unless you have 8 out of 10 of these, well, there's no relationship. And we know that that's not how human beings connect. There are all sorts of myriad things that connect human beings, and in the next 2 weeks we'll talk about the continuation and then how that doesn't continue. So this is just the start of the beginning of the relationship concept. How do relationships begin? What do people use within themselves to determine how they have that relationship? And there are many, as you saw from the list, there are many types of relationships we have, not just the ones where the person who lives in your home is the relationship I'm talking about, or the person in whose home I was brought up, the relationship, or the people who are living in my home because I begat them live in, or whatever. And that reminds me, though, my eldest son has just come to live with me now while his house is being renovated. But that's another relationship that we'll talk about. So there are all sorts of relationships, and the beginning of that has nothing to do with this. It was necessity. and kindness, I suppose, on our part, because we said yes. But it's those sorts of things. So every single thing is a relationship. And what I'm doing with you is just to point you into a concentrated way of looking at it, and then I'll let you loose. But just for this time, the beginning of the relationship, as I've said, I've broken it up to say, let's focus on what I call the first part, and then next week we'll talk about what I call the middle, and that will be fun times as well. And I think you have in your booklet some things that I'd like you to think about and prepare for next week, and then we'll see where we get to after that. Please.
Can I just put it on pause? I'm really sorry, because we've run out of time on this one, but we're going to have now a break so you'll be able to approach Barry personally and speak to him directly on your question. So, Barry, I'm going to thank you very much for the presentation. At the end of the evening, on your way out, you'll be receiving the notes summarised from each of the presenters, plus homework in some instances. You're going to have a bit of a quick break and refreshments now that are going to come out. Why don't you stand up, say hi to the people behind you, because you know the people sitting next to you, and that way you'll get to know each other. And please help yourself to some wonderful, wonderful health drink coming out. For those who want to know, it's coconut water, chia seeds, berries, and honey. We're going to do something a little different now. And we'll begin the second half with a little meditative exercise. So take your seats. And put everything out of your hands. David, can we have it a bit higher up? Feet symmetrically on the ground. Put everything on the floor. Don't worry, I will not levitate it. It'll stay there. Feel quite secure. Hands resting on knees and thighs. Back fairly straight. Gently close your eyes. And just focus on your breath, gently breathing in and breathing out, if you can, through your nose. Become aware of the difference in temperature of the air entering the nasal passages compared to the temperature of the air as it leaves your nose. Cooler air entering, warmer air exiting. Deepen your breaths in and out. Become focused on that temperature difference. Take a deeper breath and allow it to flow down to your tummy area, as if it's bypassing the chest, down to the abdomen and then out from the abdomen. And to achieve that, as you breathe in, expand your abdomen to collect the air, and then contract the abdomen to pump the air out. Taking slow, deep breath in, expanding the abdomen, and contracting it. So the abdomen acts like a pump. And now let's lend some rhythm to the breathing. We'll breathe in for a count of 3, hold for a count of 3, and then we will breathe out for a count of 4. So take a slow, deep breath in, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. And just continue breathing smoothly, gracefully, rhythmically. Smooth transitions from in to out and from out to in. And just become aware how relaxed you have become in the space of a few short minutes. Something you can achieve whenever you choose to. Focus again on your nose. As you breathe in cooler air, as you breathe out slightly warmer air. Begin moving your fingers and your toes here in the room. Move your fingers, move your toes, and when you feel comfortable, open your eyes, coming all the way back. And now you'll be in a much better frame of mind to listen to some of the controversial material that you're going to hear from our next speaker. Because Dr. Daniel Aranov, a doctor himself, a public speaker, is also founder of Dr. Dan, the creator of Evidence-Based Medicine, a podcast that he produces. And you can ask him later how to be able to secure that. He's a general practitioner and lecturer who, in his own words, is obsessed with the science of medicine. Every week he makes a new video on common health issues. They're short, relevant, and evidence-based. Things like, does cracking your knuckles cause arthritis? Do antioxidants work? Is gluten really the problem? He actually raises some very interesting questions which often go against the common kind of grain of thinking that we're used to. I've heard him previously. I've also known him for a good number of years. I think you're going to have a very enjoyable presentation. Dr. Aranov.
Hi everyone, my name's Daniel. Hey Siri, start a 1-minute timer. Sorry, 15-minute timer. Do that.
He obviously doesn't trust me at all.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about cholesterol. There's 2 things I want to talk about. The first thing is, does high cholesterol actually cause heart disease? Is high cholesterol a bad thing? Or does it actually cause cardiovascular disease? Now, when I say cardiovascular disease, I mean heart attacks, strokes, heart disease. All those terms just mean cardiovascular disease. Anything bad that happens to your heart and your brain. The second part, we're going to talk about are statins. Statins being cholesterol tablets, Lipitor, Crestor. Are they worth it? In the media, we hear they're bad, then they're good. What is the verdict? So we'll touch on that as well. Some of you may not know, but whether high cholesterol causes heart disease is controversial. In the scientific community, it's called the lipid hypothesis. And that basically says that high cholesterol causes heart disease and strokes, or cardiovascular disease. And while this theory has been widely adopted amongst cardiologists, amongst the scientific medical community, it is still very much controversial. Today we're going to cover all of the evidence and we can make our own conclusions. How does that sound? All right, so let's start with the history of our understanding of cholesterol and heart disease. Well, it all started in 1856 when Rudolf Virchow looked for the first time in the little plaques within the arteries. You know, when you have a clogged artery, what's clogging it is a plaque. He was the first one to examine these plaques under the microscope and found that one of the biggest components of these plaques was cholesterol. Then in 1973, these two gentlemen, Michael Brown and Joseph Goldstein, won a Nobel Prize. And they won a Nobel Prize for identifying that there are people who have a gene that increases their cholesterol. Now, those people also have high rates of cardiovascular disease. It's called familial hypercholesterolemia, and those people have higher rates of cardiovascular disease. But the real definitive conclusion in this whole, or what really propagated this theory, was in the 70s when the Framingham Heart Study, which was a bit of a revolutionary study, came and showed us that people who have higher cholesterol also have higher heart attacks and strokes. So this was a revolutionary study. They coined the term risk factor. It was started by the US government in 1949. Basically, they had a crisis. They didn't understand why everyone was getting heart attacks, that we hadn't a clue what was causing them. So they commissioned this study where they would take 5,000 people from a town called Framingham in the United States and follow them up. Originally they planned 20 years, but believe it or not, they're still following them up today, 70 years later. So they plan to follow them up, measure their cholesterol and their blood pressure and their smoking, and ask a gamut of questions every year, and then see who got heart attacks and who didn't. So after 20 years, in the 1970s, they found that those who had higher cholesterol also had more heart attacks. And I don't know if you care about graphs, but this is basically showing it in men. As the cholesterol went up, so did the number of heart attacks, and the same thing in women. Okay, so what do we make of this? The question I want to ask you is this means that high cholesterol is associated with cardiovascular disease. The question we want to answer tonight is, does it cause cardiovascular disease? Now that might have just confused a lot of you, so I'm going to break this down for you. Now there is good evidence that when you eat ice cream, you're more likely to drown. Very, very good evidence that when you eat ice cream, you're more likely to drown. I'm not saying that the evidence is flawed. The evidence is solid. What's going on here? Exactly. So either there's two theories. Either eating ice cream somehow causes a change in the body which makes you more susceptible to drowning, or there's something else that's causing both of those things irrespective of each other. In this case, good weather. So good weather makes you more likely to eat ice cream, and it also makes you more likely to hang around in pools. So this is a very strong association. When you eat ice cream, you're more likely to drown. In fact, the ice cream is not causing the drowning. It's associated with the drowning. So we have unbelievably solid evidence that high cholesterol is associated with cardiovascular disease. The question we want to ask is, does it cause cardiovascular disease? And I'll explain why that's a really important question when we get there. So here we go. Cholesterol is our ice cream, heart disease is our drowning. Is the cholesterol causing the heart disease, or is there some unknown factor that's causing high cholesterol and also causing high rates of heart disease? So how are we gonna get this solution? How are we gonna figure this out? Come on, the other guys are giving you homework. I'm not giving you homework. I just want you to shout and answer. So DNA test won't help. There's only one way we can get to causation in scientific evidence, and it's called a randomized controlled trial. What we want to do is we want to randomize two groups of people into two groups. Therefore, this factor that we don't know about should be split among the two groups evenly. Okay? And therefore, we're ruling out any other things that might be playing a part in this, and we're just looking at one thing. So how do we do it in this case? Well, we'll randomize people into two groups. We'll give one group a medication that lowers cholesterol, and we'll give another group that takes a placebo. And then we'll follow them up over, say, 5 years and see how many got heart attacks and how in each group. Okay? There have been 9 drugs that lower cholesterol that have been tested for whether they lower heart disease as well. Okay? So we know of about 100 different things that lower your cholesterol. Only 9 have been tested for whether they lower heart disease, heart attacks, and strokes. All right? So what I'm going to do is I've done a summary of the evidence of every single one of these. By the way, if you're interested, on my YouTube channel, I gave a talk at a conference where I went into details about the evidence behind all of these 9. You're welcome to have a look at it. It's on my YouTube channel, Dr. Daniel Aranov. But what I'm going to do is you're going to have to trust me on this one. I'm going to put a green circle for all of these 9 medications that lower cholesterol that also lowered heart disease. And I'm going to put a red circle for the ones that lowered cholesterol but did not lower heart disease. So if high cholesterol does cause heart disease, what are we going to see here on the next slide? We're going to see a lot of greens, yeah? In fact, this is the evidence. So of all these medications that have been tested to see whether they lower heart disease or stroke, only 3 have. Now, they all lower cholesterol. In fact, this medication, for example, lowers it better than any other one, and yet it increases heart disease by 25% and increases your chance of dying by 60%. This medication increases your chance of dying by about 20%. This medication increases your chance of getting heart failure. This medication, so I should mention that this medication not only lowers your bad cholesterol, but it increases your good cholesterol by 60%, yet it increases your chance of dying.
Is it by association or is it actually?
So these are causation because these are randomized controlled trials. So everything else has been counted for. Okay, but because I only have 7 minutes left, I'm going to take questions at the end if you don't mind. Okay, so there are 3 key take-home messages from just this slide. Number 1, these things are marketing to you that they lower cholesterol. They have not been tested as to whether they lower heart disease or stroke. You are taking a gamble by eating them. They're marketing it because for some reason we've become so scared of cholesterol that we want to do everything we can to lower it. But in fact, plant sterols, which are the active ingredients in all of these foods, have never been tested. Yet they might be in the statin group that also lower your chance of heart disease, but they could be in this group that increases your chance of dying by 60%. We don't know. It's never been tested. Okay? That's take-home message number 1. Do not buy something just because it lowers a blood test. Wait for the evidence that shows that it's actually good for things that matter. By the way, that works for blood pressure as well. Decreasing salt lowers your blood pressure. On average, a low-salt diet, it decreases your blood pressure by about 4 millimeters of mercury. No one has ever tested whether that decreases heart attacks or strokes. Now, if I was a betting person, I would say maybe it does. But if I really liked salt, there's not enough information in the literature out there for me to stop eating salt. That's just the way I feel. Take-home message number 2 of this information is that if you're on a certain diet or you're on a certain exercise regime, do not test your cholesterol levels to see if it's working. A lot of people will put you on a diet to lower your cholesterol. It is completely irrelevant. The diet is working if you're on the diet. The exercise is working if you're on the exercise program. The best studied diet we have in the scientific literature is the Mediterranean diet. There's been 2 very large randomized controlled trials comparing the Mediterranean diet to the low-fat diet, and it found that the Mediterranean diet lowered your risk of heart attacks and strokes by 30% over the low-fat diet. Now, it did not improve your cholesterol whatsoever. So if you're on the Mediterranean diet and you go to your doctor to get your blood test to see if the Mediterranean diet is working, you're sorely misled, okay? Because your cholesterol might not change, but the diet is still working, and do not be encouraged by having an unchanged cholesterol level. The same as exercise. Yes, there is some evidence that high-intensity physical activity can increase your good cholesterol, but the benefit that exercise gives you is completely unrelated to its effect on cholesterol. The last take-home message is about statins. Now, there is no doubt, out of all these 9 medications, including the 3 green ones, the one that stands out is statins. Okay, statins blow all of the others out of the water. They lower cardiovascular disease by a relative reduction of 30%. So just to put it in perspective, this one, which also had a green, lowers it by about 10%. Okay? This lowers it by about 30%, which is really, really remarkable. So how should we approach statins now that we have this new information? Should I take a statin? The most amazing thing is that the media guys who are reporting that it doesn't work and the media guys that are reporting that it does work are both right. And I'm going to show you why. So these Lipitor, Crestor, Zocor, they're the common statins. So here, we're just going to do a little mind exercise. If lowering cholesterol does not prevent cardiovascular disease, which I hope I've shown you, and statins do lower cardiovascular disease, which you'll just have to trust me, they do, then statins do not work by lowering cholesterol. They work via some other mechanism. It doesn't matter what mechanism, it's irrelevant. Now, when they had the cholesterol theory, now that they've seen all the other drugs, they're saying it's something to do with endothelium. It's going to change 1,000 times. The fact is that they work. Do not make the decision to take statins based on your cholesterol levels, because they are working independently of your cholesterol levels. The decision to take statins should be based on your risk of cardiovascular disease. And I like to take you through an exercise on how you can calculate this yourself. Okay, is there anyone in the audience who is on the fence about whether they should take a statin and doesn't mind sharing their personal medical information with the whole audience? Yes. Do you know your cholesterol levels? No. Do you know your cholesterol levels?
Yeah.
You do? Okay. So how old are you, sir?
65. I was first diagnosed by Park Avenue cardiologist just when statins were coming out.
Okay. Just 1 second. You're male?
Male.
You're white?
White.
Are you a smoker?
No.
Do you have diabetes?
No.
What is your blood pressure?
It's in normal range.
In normal range? So let's say 130.
Yeah.
You're not on treatment for blood pressure? Or you?
No.
No? What was your cholesterol?
It's towards the top end of the range, taking 40.
So 5. Let's go with 5.
Yeah.
Let's go with 5.5. That's a pretty high cholesterol.
That's with taking a statin, which I asked to be lowered from 80 mil to 40. So
Okay.
less is better.
So if you're on a statin and you're 5.5, then you're probably around a 6.5 before you started the statin.
Above the reference range of Australia.
Yeah. So the reference range is anything below 5 is normal, anything above 5 is abnormal. So I'm putting you in quite high. And your good cholesterol will keep as, 1. Do you have a family history of heart disease?
Yes.
Did your father or mother have a heart attack before the age of 50 or 60?
60 years.
Okay. Do you have chronic kidney disease?
No.
Do you have rheumatoid arthritis or atrial fibrillation?
None of those.
How tall are you, if you don't mind?
6'1", whatever that is, 185 centimeters.
And what's your weight?
98 kilos.
You're lucky I didn't choose you now, hey?
My cholesterol is much higher.
Okay, so this is what we have. All right. So this is you. So I've typed in all that information here. Over 10 years, your risk of getting a heart attack or a stroke is 27% over 10 years. Taking a statin will reduce your risk from 27% to 20% over 10 years. Okay? That means that you take the statin.
25
Yeah, but sorry, one sec. I'm just going to finish. So what I'm trying to say is that your risk, and everyone can calculate this for themselves, of getting a heart attack without taking a statin is 27%. With taking a statin is 20%. This gives you a reduction of 7% of your chance of getting a heart attack or a stroke. Now, for some people that's meaningful. For some people that's not. After all, another way to put this is that if you take this drug every single day for 10 years, there is a 93% chance it will do nothing. Okay? Now, for me, I would take a drug every day as long as it wasn't giving me side effects for a 6% reduction in getting a heart attack or a stroke. That's meaningful for me. But it's an individual decision, and only you can make that decision. So that is the way we should approach statins. Ignoring the cholesterol, don't check your cholesterol after, because whatever it does to your cholesterol, it's still working. Okay, thank you so much, guys.
And he was just getting warmed up. Now, if you ever really want to see him in action, he gets very, very animated, and he causes many doctors to have heart problems. Thank you very much, Daniel. More of that next week. I'd like to introduce you to Esther Althaus. Esther is a financial advisor. She specializes in divorce and inheritance. She's an award-winning advisor and passionate about working with women in situations where they have separated, divorced, become widowed, or inherited funds and have had little previous insight into wealth management. She's established a relationship with the Melbourne Beit Din and various communal leaders, which enables Esther to assist in resolving difficult cases. She's on the committee of Unchain My Heart, a coalition of Jewish women's organizations that have united to support people who are victims of get refusal. That means when there is not giving of a divorce procedure under Jewish law. Why we're dealing with the subject at all this evening is because in terms of overall wellness, stress levels are very much increased in circumstances of crisis, the kind of circumstances that both Barry and Esther deal with. And it's very, very important that we also have capacities to be able to create wellness of mind, because mind is the primary ingredient for wellness of the body. Our attitudinal response to life sends a chemistry reaction through the body as such. So I am very, very happy to have Esther here, and I look forward to hearing what she has to share with us.
Thank you, Laibl, and thank you for having me here tonight. Okay. I just want to say that this is really from my own personal account, that I'm not an expert in personal management. I've just put my experiences together, and Laibl's asked me to talk about this topic, so it really is very personal and not substantiated by any scientific evidence, although I have pulled a few things in from here and there. I also have to have a little disclaimer because I might accidentally tell you to do something and you'll listen and it could be the wrong thing for you, so we'll just put that up and then I don't have to take it off all my slides. Okay, and now we'll get into it. Okay.
Okay, Esther, we have a lawyer in the house.
We have a lawyer in the house. Okay, good. All right, so I want to talk for a moment about the whole person concept. When I became an advisor, I was introduced to a professional association which was financial advice based, which took an approach about whole person, and that's where I was introduced the first time to this concept. And the idea of this association, what they promote is that if you want to be really good in your profession and in your business, what you have to focus on as well is being good in a number of aspects of your life and trying to live a lot of elements of your life to its peak capacity. So they include things like ongoing happiness, loving family relationships. And if we go back to happiness for a sec, happiness is something that I believe is a choice. So I try to focus on doing things that make me happy and avoiding things that make me unhappy. Loving family relationships, and that sometimes can be a real challenge because sometimes it's the people that we're the closest to that we have the most complex interpersonal relationships with, and that can cause the greatest grief from a relationship perspective. Friendships. So friendships something that we all need. We need people outside of our family who we can rely on us for support and to contribute and enhance our lives with our connection. We all need to have connections with other people. Self-confidence, because really to get on with life, you have to be confident about your decision making, confident in who and what you are. And this is a little bit of an interesting one for me, because I'm known to be quite a confident person, but I'm finding that I'm still confident, but in my journey, and I think personal management is a lot about understanding where you are in your life journey, is that I'm turning 50 next year. Now, I don't have an issue with being 50, but what I'm finding has happened is that I'll just take a step back for a moment. I got divorced when I was around 30, and I thought that the process of coming to terms with my divorce and why it all happened to me was to do a reconciliation of my life to understand how did I get to this situation that I'm in now. And then I was very proud when I thought that I completed it and thought, okay, well now I've got my stuff together and I can just go on and live my life with a certain amount of confidence, and I get it. But what's happened is 20 years or almost 20 years later, I'm finding that I now need to do another reconciliation of my life, and I haven't gone from 30 to 50. What's happened is I've gone back from 0 to almost 50 on a much deeper level. And on that deeper level, it's kind of disturbing me more than I expected it to. And I think it's not a bad process. It's an interesting process because it helps you, I find that it helps me understand who and what I am, which then helps me deal with a lot of these elements moving forward. Now, obviously, good health. I don't have to talk about that. We've heard about that. Financial security, which is something that I promote in my professional life, and intellectual fulfillment. Now, we know that keeping yourself intellectually stimulated is something that is very important for warding off things like dementia, for people who retire, particularly men, having an intellectually fulfilling retirement is very important to avoid depression, which is a huge issue among men. But now if we move along, and I'm sort of going to be quick because I tend to waffle a little bit and time will pass, but life is pretty busy. And how do we manage our time when we've got all these competing interests? I mean, you may have a relationship, you'd be married, have a partner, have a spouse, how you manage those relationships and what your role is in the relationship and the expectations that it has of you, whether it's a healthy or not so healthy relationship. We've got things we've got to do around our children if we have children. Now, ageing parents, so particularly for women, and we talk a lot about this, women out of the workforce and the disparity of earnings between men and women, is that you have women who typically move out of the workforce to raise children, and then just when their children are grown up and about to be independent, they're starting to deal with ageing parents. So that's an interest. Then there's obviously special needs. So if you have children or family members or people of which you're carers for, and if you're doing that and working at the same time outside of the home, then trying to be involved in your community, and being involved in a community is also very important for financial well-being and for just general health. There are studies that have shown that being part of a community does increase your overall health, your mental health and your physical health. And then all of that and overlay it with a Jewish calendar. So you've got to stop for Chagim, start the Friday night. So there's a lot happening, and I've missed one really critical one. Can anybody guess the one thing that's missing? What about me in all of this? Like, where am I in all of this? By the time you look after everybody else, with the competing interests, who's looking after you? And are you taking time to look after you? So, okay, then I'm just going to divert for a moment just for some extra little stress levels there. That's a picture of the inside of my head, right? Yeah. So what about professional and work commitments? So within the context of your work, there's, we have a lot of different work environments. You may work for someone and you're very limited to a specific role, but at the same time, we've got, if you're attending to clients or patients, you've got to get involved with their lives. You've got to maintain professional standards and skills. When are you going to find time to do the studies, to do the course, to go on the seminar, to go on, whatever it is you need to do to maintain your accreditations? You've got to work on your business if you're a business owner. You work in your business being a practitioner. You've got to manage the people who work for you. So not only are you dealing with issues in your own life, now you've got to sort of manage everybody else's issues and still be the good guy, and then try and avoid stress and burnout in that whole process. So let's come to some solutions. Oh no, we're not even up to the solutions yet. Sorry, one more thing. So if you are involved in community, there's charity work, volunteering. If you're on a board or a committee, obligations to do with those. Speaking engagements, like things like this. And just generally giving back. So you can see that there's quite a few things in the context of a whole person's life. And we didn't even discuss, spirituality, which is also, an element of that we should try to develop. That, there's a lot of competing interests. There's a lot of things pulling at us at all different directions. And what are some tips to try and manage all those interests? So, number one, managing time. Okay, that's a big one. It's really a challenge to manage time when you've got all those other aspects of your life that you need to facilitate. So, number one, so these are just my tips, is to prioritise. So, really understand what those, take a moment to think about what those interests are, where you're really needed, what is really important for you to get to first, because sometimes it's the loudest people get your attention the first, or the email that just pops up, or the phone's calling, and life, all the different aspects of our life, especially with the use of the phone now, has started to migrate into each other. It used to be that if you were with your family, you were out at the park, no one could call you. If you're at home or if you're at work, you weren't so accessible. Now, all aspects of our life have just become mumbo jumbo, and how do we segregate them so that we can focus and then deal with things bit by bit? Delegation is a huge part of it. If you try to do everything yourself, how effective are you going to be at doing anything? I mean, no one person is good at absolutely everything. So let someone else do something for you. Give them an opportunity to upskill or to take some responsibility. I'm sort of mixing things up a bit there, so that they can help you in the long run. It might take a bit of time, but don't think of it as a negative thing. You're investing into your own time by delegating and outsourcing to someone else to do the things that you're not particularly good at. So whether it's your family or staff or to kids, I mean, we have a lot of helicopter parenting these days, and I think it's really important for us to be able to pass things and make other people in our lives responsible for sharing in whatever the tasks are that need to be done, because if you can have a little bit of space and not be the one to have to do everything, all of you will do everything a little bit better. Don't be a perfectionist is another one of my tips. I'm not a perfectionist. I don't believe in perfectionism. Is that the word? Because, I'm going out of order here, I think perfection is very momentary. Just when you think you've reached perfect, something in the environment is going to change. Laws are going to change, technology, your attitude, your health, so many things can change. And if you can't adapt to those changes, what's the point of being perfect? Perfect only lasts for 1 second. And there's no aspiration to continue beyond and to keep growing and to keep developing if you think you've reached the peak of where you're at. Foster autonomy. Let the people around you make decisions. I mean, if you work in medicine, it's a little bit different. Generally, no one's going to die, and everything is reversible. We've had to reverse some really big monies that accidentally got transferred to wrong accounts or in and out of super. Everything can be fixed, okay? And just, about adaptability and allowing, fostering autonomy. You've heard of IQ, right? Have you heard of EQ? Okay, so there's a new Q, which is AQ. Does anyone know what AQ is? It's adaptability quotient, and that's what employers and entrepreneurial companies and people are looking for. How adaptable are you to change? So adaptability is a very important one and fits into a lot of those categories. Then, don't be a control freak. No one likes a control freak. So, give people an opportunity to grow and shine. The more you allow people to showcase what they're good at, the more pride there is, the more self-ownership there is in the group outcome, and everyone around you will generally be happier and they'll like you more. Avoid distractions if possible. So if you can put a little bit of structure around the things that distract you, so it could be the technology, it could be other people, it could be where you sit in your office. Just recognise what are the things that are taking your time. And then I've mentioned this already, teach responsibility, particularly to your children. Of course, it's easier for you just to do it yourself, but in the long run, and not even in the long run, in the short run, it's if you allow your kids, if you've got kids, to do jobs, or even if you're in a relationship, like I've heard my mum will often say, I don't want him to, he doesn't do it the way I like him to do it. So what? If he does it a little bit differently, does it really matter? Or you're going to be the one that has to do everything and then get burnt out because it's your choice. It's not because he doesn't want to do it. It's because you're not giving him an opportunity to do it. It doesn't have to be your way. So, managing time. Next, learning how to say no. Okay, I'm quite good at that. When my kids were little, they used to say to me, Mum, and I'd just go, no. And they go, what do you mean no? I said, I can tell by the way you're saying mum that it's a question where the answer's going to be no. So we're just saving time, right? And they go, that's not fair. I go, all right, ask me. Whoops. And I asked the question, Mum, can we blah, 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 blah? And what do you think the answer was? No. But when you're saying no, be very careful that, you're not rejecting someone. You're refusing to do something, but you're not actually rejecting them. And the reason why people often don't want to say no is because they either have a fear of letting people down. You don't want to let people down. Everyone relies on you. No one can get anything done if you don't do it for them. You don't want to hurt people's feelings. You don't want to appear to be incompetent. You want everyone to think that you're good at everything. Hey, I'm Superwoman. I can do it all, right? Wrong. What about guilt? Jewish guilt. Okay, I try not to do guilt. I've trained myself to not do guilt. And with the guilt, ask yourself, if you're involved in something and you're feeling guilty about, you're already thinking about you don't want to continue doing it, you want to extricate yourself, what are you really contributing with that attitude? And do you really need to be there? Is that organisation, obviously if it's your business or if it's your children, you can't just walk out so easily. But what are you really contributing? And, if it's not aligned with your values, if the cause, if it just doesn't resonate or you're just fatigued with it, maybe step away and let someone else with a new passion, a fresh passion, make space for someone else. Because if you really do believe in the greater good of what you're working for, then focus on the outcome and not your ego of being able to say, oh, well, I'm involved in this or I'm involved in that. Be a referrer rather than a fixer. So very often someone will ask us, oh, I need help with something, can you fix, they need a solution. But they're not necessarily looking for a solution from us. And we can very quickly be the ones, to say, oh yeah, you know what, why don't we just this, I'll come over and I'll do this and I'll do that. No, we don't have to. Just take a step back, let someone else do it. Yeah, be the referrer. Stay true to your values. So if you feel like you're being compromised in any particular way that's not aligned with what your belief system is, walk away, say no. And then this is a really good thing I just came across recently. It's called the empathy sandwich formula. Okay, it's how to say no, right? The empathy sandwich formula, which is basically empathize, decline, and empathise again. So I'm going to give you an example in a moment, but that was a slide that I stuck in late, so I've just got to just say no, just say no, just say no, because the more you say no, the easier it gets. Practice it, works. So here's an example, a request. Esther, can you come over and help me fill in some forms? Okay, so that's me empathising, going, forms, yeah, I remember last year this was very overwhelming for you and took you a little longer than the others to get done. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be able to do this for you. So you need to be very clear and don't waver. It's got to be very clear. And then empathise again. I know it might take you a while, and you always try to have them in on time. You know, so there's lots of different examples. You're feeling sorry for them. You're not going to do it though, and just so that's the end of it. There's a lot to put into 15 minutes. Laibl, I'm not sure if you're intending to send out the slides, but I'm very happy for everyone to have a copy of the slides, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther. That was wonderful. And thank you, everybody. The speakers have very kindly presented summaries of their presentations. Those notes are available in the front as you walk out. Seb will very kindly pass them over to you. And I want to thank the speakers very much for taking their time this evening. And the message which I'd like you very much to walk away with is the variety of presentations tonight are all facets of the one life. And they are all spokes in the wheel. And that wheel is called fulfillment and happiness. So please ensure that you master all the different spokes in the wheel, because they all make a very important contribution, and we've had some wonderful experts contributing. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week.